Really excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tamsin Woolley-Barker. She's an evolutionary biologist and anthropologist. She's studied apes in Africa and humpback whales in Alaska and animals all over the world. But in speaking with her, it's really clear that her passion is around how can we learn from nature about how we can be more productive in the way that we organize in the world. And so she's going to come and talk to us about biomimicry. So let's give her a warm welcome.
As our technologies connect us more, as we become more connected globally, you enter a complex world. And so a complex world is characterized by interconnection that's so dense that you don't know what's going to happen. So a tiny little effect over here can have giant effects somewhere else that are dramatic and unexpected and often catastrophic. And so the only thing we know in a complex world is that these things are going to happen more often. That's all we know. And so when you get into that kind of condition, you realize that you can no longer design for efficiency and because predictability isn't there. So you have to switch gears into resilience and designing for resilience. And I think that is the tipping point that you are all facing right now in your organizational design, is that you've been working for so long in this efficiency model, and we are so good at maximizing efficiency, but now we're entering a time when we can't predict what's going to happen. And if you don't survive, then it doesn't matter, does it? So resilience becomes more important. And when, I'm an evolutionary biologist, so my background is looking in these different species and seeing how they've stood the test of time. And it's evolutionary biology, so it's like, 5 extinction events. What's left after 4 billion years of evolution? And what we see is that these are resilient species. They don't maximize efficiency, they optimize resilience. Efficiency often comes with that, but it's secondary. So why are we still designing our companies for predictability? And the way we do that is by turning them into machines. People into cogs. We do standard operating procedures, best practices, siloed departments, fixed job descriptions, all this kind of stuff. And it works great in a predictable world that doesn't change. But in a dynamic, complex world, it's a disaster. When we design for predictability and efficiency, we go to this machine-like model where we turn people into cogs. No wonder 70% of us are disengaged from our job, because nobody's that motivated to be a cog in a machine, really. So with machines, they rely on someone at the top knowing what could happen. They rely on predictability. Somebody's got to know what this machine's supposed to do. But and nature does use hierarchies all the time. Nature does rely on hierarchies for one thing, to stop change from happening. So in our bodies, cancerous cells are occurring all the time for all of us. And we have this roaming hierarchical immune system that's finding those cells and removing them, most of them, hopefully. This hierarchy is designed to prevent change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But when you have changing conditions, hierarchies are the wrong model for dealing with change. And that's the problem that we've had, is that we put all our effort into designing systems that are efficient and rigid and hierarchical, when really now we're moving into a time when change is a given and we don't have the structure to deal with it. There's no way we could create a contingency plan for everything that might happen. So the plan now, the strategy, has to become the structure. And so organizational design becomes the strategy. So it becomes extremely important. And the key to it is diversity and inclusion, making people feel like they belong, and that all those diverse voices are heard. And we rely on all that to create a collective intelligence that lets us do things we couldn't do before. So, but the problem is, in our organizational cultures, we try to kill that because we're still in that machine mindset. So we want to have uniformity because we think that's the only way to scale up. The machine-like mechanistic way that we've designed our companies is pretty much doomed to fail. And so how can we re-engineer our companies to be flexible in the face of this kind of unpredictability? And that's really the challenge that we're facing. So we've got a major reorganization that we need to do across society in order to get where we need to go. But the models for doing this are already here all around us. And I love that I was given this place to talk, because if you look at these trees, you know, they're fantastic. And like this oak tree over here, I mean, it could be 150 years old. I don't know. These are beautiful. But what you don't see is there is a network of fungus underground. And it's very, very dense. And these are all genetically distinct individuals like us, but they connect and they form this web-like grid underground that's connecting all the trees, and they're moving water and nutrients around, feeding the trees, and even signals from insects. So if an insect bites one tree, the fungus will take that signal to another tree and let them know, hey, it's time to start making some defensive compounds. This creates, you know, this regenerative ecosystem that they're feeding the life that feeds their own future offspring and making more with each generation. But they do it in some really specific ways: connection, diversity, and purpose. And it's the same way that the ants do it. It's the same way the honeybees do it. And it's the same way people do it. It's actually the way we naturally work in our lives. Humans are exquisitely designed for change. And yet, when you put us in these organizations and with, you know, best practices and rigid job descriptions and all of this, suddenly these institutions become very frozen and rigid and not flexible and not able to adapt to the future. But our ability is natural within us. You know, in your families, in your friends, you make a plan and you do what seems right and you share a purpose and it's self-organized, right? And you're happy. And at work, you do what you're told. And you're not sure why. I'm a biomimic, and I'm also an evolutionary anthropologist, so I studied human evolution. So I look at evolutionary psychology, what makes humans tick, and what motivates them, and tried to combine that into a way of looking at the way we work. Because, of course, most of our waking hours are spent working. I mean, we know that 70% of our employees are disengaged at work, and we know that engaged employees are 44% more productive and more innovative. And we know that inspired employees are 125% more productive. So there's a dramatic return on investment if you can get there. Well, okay, there's a company called Interface. So they are a carpet company. And at one point, they were just an ordinary carpet company, you know, nothing special. And you know how much waste there is in carpet and all that. But the CEO, Ray Anderson, read a book called Natural Capital, and he also read the biomimicry book. And he got really excited, and he's like, I want to try that. So he called Biomimicry 3.8 in, which is an organization I used to work for. They took him for a walk. All these carpet designers, let's just go for a walk. And the guys were like, really? You know, did we just hire a tree hugger or what? Yeah. And so they go for a walk, but they came back and they were all feeling good because, like, everybody likes taking a walk in the woods. And they started looking for the deep patterns, and they were like, well, it's random. It's this random mix of leaves, and you know, and it's all digested and turn back into fertilizer for the trees and these kind of things. So then they came up with the idea of, well, hey, what if we made carpet tiles, these squares, that could be put in all random, and it actually looks nice. We like random. Then there's no more waste because one square's bad, we pull it out and put a new one. And the other thing is they don't need glue anymore because they mimic the gecko tape. So all that formaldehyde glue that the installers were not liking, gone. And the waste was just dramatically lowered, and people liked them. And then anyone could install them because it doesn't matter what direction they go. So it was a hit. What they didn't expect was that the employees got super excited. They were very engaged in the process. And they said, hey, we want to do some more of this. So that's when they did the gecko tape sticking. And then the numbers came in, and engagement doubled, and profits doubled. And now they're the largest carpet tile company in the world. But they went one more step further, and because the employees got so excited about this, they wanted to go the next step. And how would nature really do it? It would digest them and turn them back into something that things grow on. And so they ended up doing a program in the Philippines where this village was a fishing village that had overfished its base and was in collapse. And so they paid the town, the village, to go collect the nets because they were abandoning them out to sea. So they collected the nets, and the company bought them, and they turned them into carpet. And they gave the money back to the village in the form of microloans and education. And now they have this partnership. So all the carpet is actually made from these. And now turnover has just plummeted in the company because people love doing it. It feels good. What is it that motivates people? What makes them engaged? And it turns out that it's pretty simple. It's 3 things. Purpose. People like to do things that matter. Relationships. They like to do it with people that they like. And the third thing is freedom. They like to do it their way. Those are all 3 things that are denied to us at work often. Wait, now, how do we implement that in our organizations? How do we get that going? So how does nature do it? And one of the things that nature uses for resilience, the primary thing they do, is they rely on diversity and experimentation. And I'm going to give you the example of the water flea. This is I got all these little biological stories. So I'm from San Diego, and we have these clay pan mesas, and it doesn't rain a lot, but when it does, these clay pan mesas fill with water, and these little water fleas come to life, and they have to move fast because this water and this food is really short-lived. So first thing they do is they all hatch and they turn into females, and they start cloning themselves as fast as they can and eating as fast as they can. Super efficient. And as soon as things start, the water warms up, the oxygen goes down, the food disappears, and they switch to sex. They start making males, they have sex. And that is a strategy for increasing diversity, because when the going gets tough, diversity wins the day. So now you've got diverse experiments in the population, and they're massively parallel experiments. They'll try anything to survive. And yet, in our companies, we do the opposite. When times get tough, what do? We cut R&D. We lay people off. We stop experimenting. We get super efficient, ruthlessly efficient. After 4 billion years of evolution, we know that that is the exact wrong strategy. And yet, we get cash-strapped and we shrink. So we think of ants as being a clone army, right? You're like, why would I want to be like an ant? I don't want to be like an ant. That sounds terrible. But it turns out, my friend is an ant researcher, and she said that by dotting different colors on their backs, she can actually tell them apart by their behavior. So, she'll be sitting there and see one ant cruise across there, and she'll go, hey, that's Stalin over there. What's he doing? She's Russian. She named them all Russian. Hey, what's Kropotkin doing over there? Yeah, It's really crazy that the statistically no two ants are alike. The same is true within honeybees and these different superorganisms. It's surprising to us, but that right there, that diversity, is the source of the collective intelligence that we rely on to make good decisions. Because all of you have different perspectives, different experiences, different talents to offer. This new model that's based on these superorganism societies is getting some widespread use. I don't know if you know Stanley McChrystal's task force. He's really implemented this, which is funny because he didn't actually know about, he wasn't a biomimic, he didn't use biological models at all. He realized, fighting Al-Qaeda, that this was a network and that the US military was working within this very rigid, stratified system and was completely unable to match Al-Qaeda, even though they didn't have the strength and the efficiency and the knowledge and the resources. And the reason was simply because they were a very protean kind of network, like a slime mold. And yeah, they were like a slime mold. So you know how they can just find things and you can't predict them and they're amorphous. Stanley McChrystal was able to mimic that in the task force. He did it in two ways. Created shared consciousness among the team. And what that involves is extreme transparency, so everyone can see the whole system. Everyone has all of the information, they can see it. So they know what's going on everywhere, not just in their team. And trust, building trust and connection. So little signals of belonging become very important. And then empowered execution, so pushing the action out to the front lines. So giving people the power to make the decisions where they're sensing the input. And the results are startling. 17 times more effective and faster. We're looking at a real change in what we need organizations to do and the way that we do them. Organisms, any organism you look at, is 25% more efficient than you'd predict from its cells, which is good. It's efficient. Companies are 30% less efficient than you would predict. And the reason is the organizational drag that we all have to live with. But cities, we know, are 30% more efficient than we would expect from an organism. And the reason is the diversity that we have within humans and the self-organization. So we could work as organisms, we could work as companies, or we could work as cities. And we have this ability to do it. And it's just harnessing that diversity and that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose to do that. That's the way we like to work. So thank you so much.